Welcome everyone to another session of the November FD seminar. Here we're talking about IT and cyber assurance, and you've got myself, Phil Osgathorpe, who's the head of cyber and IT assurance here at PKF Francis Clark. So we're going to be starting off with some IT assurance aspects, and then we're going to roll into some cyber assurance pieces. But first of all, wanting to look at system implementation. So we're seeing many of our clients invest in technology, and that could be existing or new technology. What's important for us, though, is that when we see our clients invest in technology, we want to understand how that might alter the financial audit approach, but more importantly, how we might be able to jointly leverage that investment for the benefit of the audit. So what could this look like? Well, let's consider the scenario which most commonly affects the audit approach, a change in finance systems, for example, your general ledger. One of the most important and perhaps obvious items we'll need to understand the completeness and accuracy of the data transfer from system A to system B. That might be easy to assess, sort of going from closing trial balance in system A to opening trial balance in system B, but it's not always easy for us to follow the thought processes, least of all retrospectively. It's really important, therefore, to maintain clear documentation so we can follow the mappings of the data and what you did. There will likely be, for example, different trial balance or nominal codes when you switch systems, possibly the opportunity to aggregate or disaggregate balances, an opportunity to also alter the chart of accounts, and maybe more. So all these things are really important for us to understand and be able to reperform, but the data migration considerations, unfortunately, don't stop there. So whilst it's great that you need to keep all that documentation around the data migration process, we then need to think about, well, what about all the non-transactional data that you're migrating? For example, what about useful economic lives of assets or inventory valuation methods? Inventory costings, forex rates, interest rates, discounts, rebates, allowances, tax, the list goes on. All the transactional data could be correct on day naught. So let's go back to that kind of closing TB in system A, opening TB in system B. That maps perfect. Day naught, everything's fine. But if that other data that I was just listing, that doesn't come across completely or accurately, now you've got possibly issues from day one onwards. Day one onwards. And so things might start to go wrong thereafter. And again, that's still stuff that we would care about. So we're not only going to be looking at that sort of trial balance mapping, we're also going to be looking at other elements of your data as well. It's very rare that when a business implements a new system, the processes remain unchanged. There's commonly sort of some new automation or configuration that which can be leveraged to make life easier, more efficient and more effective. We need to spend time understanding those new processes so we can identify new or different risks of misstatement to the financial statements, but also ways in which we might be able to rely on different aspects of your systems, which might again benefit the audit approach. Where automation is relied upon, we may need to alter our audit approach to now audit those configurations and the way in which those systems are controlled. Mismanagement of those configurations could potentially lead to material misstatement, and hence why we need to look at it. It could also likely mean some additional time is required as part of the financial audit, because we need to sort of sit down with your finance teams, your IT teams, and get all the information we need to perform a thorough risk assessment and assess whether the audit approach needs to be redesigned in any way. But of course, we'll have conversations with you throughout that process. What's most important from my perspective in this is, if you're planning on doing this, please raise it with your audit engagement team as early as possible. The earlier, the better. We should be able to have some upfront conversations about the process and provide some best practice advice on what we have seen elsewhere, which actually neatly brings me on to the next slide. So here we have some of the pitfalls in system implementations, and this is generally in my experience, my professional experience. So I previously worked at a Big Four for 12 years, worked in IT assurance, worked on some sort of large global listed clients, but also some of the sort of owner managed businesses. And generally what we tend to see is actually very common reasons for things going wrong, irrespective of size and complexity. So coming on to the first point there, the second you have a lack of engagement from either the business or IT, or more commonly case, sort of one team is left out of certain communications, the project starts to falter. And it may not seem like it does at first, but each team has an integral part to play. The business helps to ensure the implementation is fit for purpose, while the IT team helps the implementation actually happen. You need both of those aspects to make sure that when the project goes live, everything is as you would hope it would be. So what's also important is having a dedicated project management team, a methodology, and setting specific milestones along the way. And that's a great way to monitor progress. These milestones generally have a go, no-go decision point, and those are critical factors for the project to progress. So making sure that everyone's working towards those stage gates, those milestones, can actually really help keep things on track, or if things are starting to falter or fall behind, again, that helps it easily be monitored, especially when you have it in that chunk by chunk format. All of that also helps link the understanding of the project into critical paths, so that actually you can see when certain aspects of the project can fall behind and not impact the overall timeline, versus other elements which are actually really critical and they just can't fall behind. That's going to need a lot of the focus and the time and attention. In my professional experience, I think I'm yet to really come across a project which generally tends to run to budget and time, and the two of those are intrinsically linked: more time, more cost. However long you think the project will take at each stage, I would generally, as a word of caution, build some buffer time in, and therefore cost. If the buffer isn't needed in the end, that's just initial time back, or actually some buffer that you might be able to move somewhere else in the project, which can actually be really valuable later on. The next point is following a similar thought process. So trying to test as much as you can and don't overlook some of the basic functionality. Getting frontline staff and everyday users to test the system and ensure they can perform their day-to-day role is really, really important, because if they struggle to be able to achieve this once the system's gone live, you're going to have productivity issues from day one. This then has a cascading effect, which can lead to lack of effective adoption and buy-in of the system, users developing alternative processes and workarounds, and over time, slowly but surely, your control environment begins to erode away. That can really begin to impact the financial audit and have, obviously, a bigger consideration for us when we're taking our audit approach. There'll be some data that can come across inaccurately or incompletely and not impact day-to-day operations too much. On the flip side, you can have very much the opposite. It's really important that you work out the data that cannot afford to be wrong and focus time and attention in that area. Create tolerance thresholds, perhaps, for your data loading process. It's not uncommon for there to be issues over sort of 5% of your data. But if your business can run effectively at 95% of the data being effective, that's something that's good to be aware of. You can factor that into your process, and you can actually then look to iron out that 5% at a later date or post go live. Some of those things are real key strategic pieces of information to understand and can be built into your kind of project management methodology at the very beginning. When rolling out a new system, it's very common to allocate excessive privileges to individuals in order to just get the project done. However, what is also quite common is for companies to forget to restrict the access of those individuals after the system has gone live. In that case, you now have a number of users with privileges in excess of what they require, which then can lead to additional risks over sort of data integrity, and then lead to subsequent issues for the audit as well. That can also create sort of security issues for your systems as well when you have excessive privileges to too many individuals. Focusing on now the post-implementation phase, it's also referred to as the hypercare phase, and for good reason. You need to expect teething problems. Depending on the size of the project and the number of users and individuals able to raise and respond to issues, this period can easily range from sort of 1 to 6 months. I've actually seen it go on longer for much more global projects, but 1 to 6 months is probably a good benchmark for SMEs. There will always be something that wasn't captured or thought about as part of the implementation and testing phase. That's just a given. But the robustness of those earlier stages of the product can dramatically reduce the time and effort required in that hypercare phase. So the more due diligence you do up front, the easier that hypercare phase will be. The less you do up front, the more painful that's likely to be. Lastly, and most importantly for us as auditors, well, we love documentation, we love audit evidence. We want to be able to see all the stages of the project retrospectively to provide us reassurance that everything went to plan, or if it didn't, how that risk was managed effectively. Having a conversation about these things upfront and planning for this can be really helpful, because we can also communicate to you on what we're looking for, so that when you're going through the process, you can make sure to document all of that. Having a conversation about it is all great, but seeing documentation which supports the discussion is obviously better. It helps to inform our risk assessment and enable us to manage the audit process with you as effectively as possible. So now we're coming on to sort of an unfortunate area, if you will, but something we're seeing right now is that more and more organizations are becoming victims of cyber attacks. And therefore, we wanted to talk about how that can impact a financial audit. The reality is the trend is likely to go in one direction when it comes to cyber attacks, and it's not the direction we all want it to be. More and more organizations are getting hit. We therefore thought it would be helpful to talk about what we might expect to see and do if it becomes part of an audit. The first question there on the left-hand side is hopefully an easy one to answer, simple yes or no. Obviously, the impact of a yes having a very different impact of a no. So what if that happened in the year? Well, we would hope you would inform us relatively soon after the event and not wait for it to come up in ad hoc conversations. We appreciate that if or when it happens, informing your auditors is not necessarily top of your priority list at the time, but once some sense of normality resumes, it would be good to talk about it with you so we can really gain to look to understand and see if there has been a financial audit impact. And the way we would do that is we look at the other questions on this screen and we kind of go from a left to right process here. So the key things we want to understand: what did you do? What actions did you take as a business and a management team? Did you invoke your playbook? Did you perform certain actions and procedures in a very methodical way? Hopefully that was the case, and less sort of panic and fear. But do you have a step-by-step sort of log of what happened? Sometimes when you have a third party supporting you, they actually maintain almost a minute by minute or action by action log and log the time and everything that happened. That's really helpful for us as auditors. Coming on to the third box there, did you seek advice? Did you go to an external specialist? Was this your third party service provider, or potentially someone completely different? Or did you go through a specialist through your cyber insurance, perhaps? Some forms of cyber insurance actually allow you access to cyber and forensic specialists. What assessment of skills and expertise did you perform to know that they were the right people to help in the situation? Obviously, if you've got a specialist as part of the cyber insurance, that's probably a given. But when it's your third-party service provider, have you already thought about that up front? Do they genuinely have those skills and expertise? It's not something you want to be having to think about in the moment. You want to have that consideration up front. So then, one of the most important questions there: what was the impact, and what was the scale of the impact? Did it impact you just operationally? Did it impact you financially? Are the finance systems impacted in any way? Is there a ransom to be paid? Is there a concern over integrity of data and systems? Could there be a lawsuit and subsequent fines? These are all things that we need to know about and ask about, because it has a financial statement impact. And lastly, very much to the other slide, and equally important, what documentation do you have or have you maintained for us to review and assess retrospectively? We're not expecting to sit there alongside you and be able to document it all the way through. That doesn't seem practical or reasonable, but actually we're going to need to get some comfort retrospectively. So if you somehow got comfortable that everything is okay and nothing is impacted, we need to be able to independently draw those same conclusions. The difference is we weren't there when it happened, so we need that picture to be painted for us. The risks need to be shown as considered and addressed, that appropriate knowledge and expertise was sought, and any actions that were taken were appropriate and commensurate to the situation. It's so common for the documentation to be forgotten about, especially in the midst of a cyber attack. And the last thing you want is to have a painful cyber attack experience, followed by a potentially more painful conversation with your auditors on what happened and having no evidence to support it. Fab. So that concludes sort of the IT assurance aspects that we wanted to raise with you. And so what I would like to raise with you now is sort of the cyber landscape and some of the things that are probably very relevant for you to be aware of. So we'll transition into the threat landscape. And we've all seen the headlines in the news at the moment, but let's stick to the facts, right? So the cyber attack on M&S is still impacting them 8 to 9 months post-attack, with expectations of costs to that organization north of $500 million. Co-op admitted to the top line revenue being impacted by more than 200 million, and if you factor in cost as well, it's probably a very similar figure to M&S. M&S had cyber insurance policy of 100 million, likely claimed or will claim for the full amount. That's going to send ripples through the cyber insurance market. It's already happening. The baseline expectation of what an insurable organization is rising. If you're in the retail industry, you can expect to see your cyber premiums take a jump. You've then got JLR. They received a bailout from the government of their supplying let me say that again. JLR received a bailout from the government of their supply chain to the tune of $1.5 billion, and that's a loan. But the UK, and as a result of that cyber attack, the UK economy has been impacted by 1.9 billion just from that cyber attack alone. Basically a 2 billion impact to the UK economy from one organization. It impacted over 5,000 organizations in their supply chain. It's huge. JLR and Co-op didn't have cyber insurance, so they're literally footing the bill for all of that. So how did all of these attacks happen? Combination of social engineering and supply chain exploits. And I'm going to come on to some pieces right at the very bottom there where you've got key learnings on some things that you can do as an organization to address some of these areas. But these are two commonly impacted areas for businesses and organizations, and genuinely under-resourced aspects of a cybersecurity program. Coming on to the second point there on the slide, double extortion tactics. What's that? So we're seeing cyber criminals deploy ransomware across businesses, request a ransomware or ransom in order for their systems to be decrypted, and they can continue their sort of business again. Now, if that business say, fine, keep our systems encrypted, we're going to spin up our systems over here, we can restore from backup, that's not a problem. The cyber criminals realize that there's value to that organization's data. They're now going to request a ransom to not leak that data on the dark web. That is that double extortion tactic that we're seeing right now. Combine this element with the next 2 points, such as ransomware as a service and the impact of AI, the bar is being significantly lowered in order to enter the world of cybercrime. AI is making it easier. Ransomware as a service is basically a subscription service where you can pay a monthly amount, you get all the tools to hack an organization. It's a scary, scary world. Combine this again with the average age in a UK study of an individual performing cybercrime is 22. But that included a significant proportion of individuals under the age of 18. If you think how impressionable young people are, especially at that age, and in a world where algorithms that steer young minds just one step further to the left or to the right, further and further and further with each video and reel that they see, it's no wonder that this is the case. You've got a world of cybercrime and it pays. The expectation is by the end of 2025, global cybercrime is going to tot up to sort of $10.5 trillion, I think it is, which on a GDP measurement would be the third largest country in the world. Coming on to the next point now, the most vulnerable software and systems are those which are end of life. What does that mean? It means the vendor is no longer supporting those systems. It means it will not continue to get updates and over time becomes increasingly vulnerable. Circa 50% of all weaponized system vulnerabilities are in relation to end-of-life systems and software. So if you're running anything like that, it's really important that you update them. For example, Windows 10 became end-of-life on the 14th of October this year. So if you don't have the extended security package, you are literally at risk right now. As was the case for the organizations already mentioned, so M&S, Co-op, JLR, people are generally the weak point in any organization. It's easy for human error to happen. We're all busy in trying to manage a number of different things. It only takes one set of credentials to be leaked for an organization to potentially succumb to a cyber attack. One of the best technical controls to have in place to protect against this is multi-factor authentication and putting it across every aspect of your business. Coming on to the insider threat point. So there's a cyber BBC correspondent called Joe Tidy. He was approached by a Russian-based cyber criminal organization called Medusa via the secure messaging app Signal. They asked him to share his logon credentials, and then they offered him, if he did, 15% of any ransom they got out of the BBC. They basically said you wouldn't have to work another day in your life. If he got that level of payout, he'd be rich beyond his wildest dreams. And it just shows, unfortunately, that when you thought the insider threat was probably not a major risk, the cyber criminals are thinking again and changing the way they're acting in order to exploit in new and different ways. Penultimately for this slide, the NCSC annual report, so the National Cybersecurity Centre report 2025, talks about cybersecurity being a boardroom priority. It's an organizational risk. It's not an IT risk. It shouldn't be IT's problem. It should be talked about in board meetings. And if it's not, then actually it could be indicating that your organization could be at a greater risk than you realize. Key learning. So enough of the doom and gloom. What can be done, or what can you be doing as an organization? Implement multi-factor authentication across your entire business. No exceptions. On-premise, cloud services, everything. As a personal note, I even have multi-factor authentication on my personal emails. It just makes logical sense to me. I want to protect it. It has sensitive information about myself. I want to keep that protected. Lock down your team's abilities to sign up to or download new software and systems. That should be managed centrally. Review your privileged user accounts frequently. They have the keys to your kingdom and are only ever one click away from giving the keys to someone externally. Review your supplier onboarding and existing relationships, perform due diligence, and then annual checks as a minimum. Safeguard your data. Seek external assurance. Get advice on best practices and how to progress little by little over time. Don't try and achieve everything at once. Try to achieve it over time, little by little. Now, I want to come on to a little bit of a demo, which is taking you through a particular website called Ransomware.live. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen and or the slides and hopefully share my screen. So bear with me one moment as I do that. So I can see that sharing now. This is my screen. Apologies, I'm going to be focusing my attention slightly to the right where my other screen is. But this is a site that is put together by the CTO of Computer Center. He's a cyber evangelist, and effectively, he's scraping all of this data that's publicly available on the dark web from a number of sources. And it's not the whole picture, but it's a big picture. First thing, you've got this victims page. If I start to scroll through here, you can see there are victims all over the world, all different companies, but I challenge you to find any of those names that are blue chip names, blue chip companies that I've been talking to, like JLR, M&S, Co-op. These are not those names. And what it actually shows you is that it's just any company can be impacted by a cyber attack. Now, hopping onto the statistics page, what you can see there is you can see some of the top 10 ransomware groups which are most prevalent. Akira, for me, is one that seems to be, how can I put it, most successful in a bad way, because they tend to get a lot of money. I'll come on to something to show you the statistics behind that. You can see victims on a month-by-month basis over the last 3 years. What's really telling from this graph here is actually by October this year, the total amount of victims that this website has been able to identify has outstripped every previous year. And we've still got 2 months to go of the year. You can look at the top 10 sectors being impacted: manufacturing, technology, healthcare, business services, and so on. You can even see the top 10 countries here. The UK or Great Britain features as number 4. So then I just want to come on to a slightly sobering element to this website. And if I click on the negotiations piece, excuse me, what we can see here is the Akira cyber criminal gang. And you can see the ransoms that they're requesting from organizations. You can also see the negotiated ransom. Now, if I order the data based on the negotiated ransom, what we can see here is you can see they're getting some significant payouts in some instances. And what you can do is, if we take this line here where they requested 2.4 million and they received 1 million, there were 84 messages in that chain. How can we see that? Well, if we click this link here, you can now start to see the conversation, the encrypted conversation between the cyber criminal organization and the victim. And as you start to scroll through, there are some really telling things. And there are points in this piece that I really want to focus on. So basically, you get all the way down, they're bartering back and forth. They want some proof of evidence they actually have their data and so on. So they share that. They're then bartering on how much they want to pay. They eventually settle on $1 million. You get to this point here and they're saying, yep, we've received a fraction of the amount that we're expecting. They then start to send the rest. The coins are sent. They then say, cool, thank you, we've received that. Actually, now you need to wait 24 hours before we're going to give you anything for decrypting your data. Fortunately, the cyber criminal gang provides the decryption key. And then what they do is they go on to give you a message that says, by the way, you might want to consider these 9 things here and implementing them across your business, because this is probably one of the ways that we got into your organization. They say, thank you, we want some evidence of proof of deletion. You can see that there's some proof of deletion, but the very last message, by the way, we've maintained 3 of your files in the archive. So what that's even saying is actually not all of their data is safe, and they've just paid $1 million. I just wanted to show this website because I think it just brings it to life. It helps to show people that this is genuinely happening. It's not just the big organizations. It could be just to your organization right now. And coming on to the next slide, are you doing enough? So ultimately, we're wanting you to manage the risk. And how are you managing that risk? Well, an organizational risk register, that's a great start. But then what's the granularity that's coming off of that? How are you measuring that risk? Are you considering the controls in your organization that's reducing that risk to potentially an acceptably low level? We then get into conversations around risk tolerance levels, risk acceptance levels. Have your organization been talking about that? Coming on to the next point, should you be doing more? Well, have you assessed the potential financial impact? Have you modeled potentially what a cyber attack might do to your organization? This actually allows you, when you start talking in these terms, in financial terms, it allows you to weigh up the cost benefit scenario. So if we invested X amount more into our security program, that might reduce our potential loss exposure by X. That could be a fantastic return on investment, which brings me on to my next point there. Are you seeing the benefits? And if you're not seeing the benefits, it's possibly that actually there's stuff that's happening in your organization that's just not being communicated or expressed in the right way. And sometimes it's actually turning that sort of spend into just seeing it as a spend, but turning it into a lever for return on investment. Now, when it comes to SMEs, cybersecurity and IT generally are frequently outsourced processes. Why? Because there's usually a lack of knowledge, skills, and expertise in-house. That's expected. But what's also the reality is, just because you outsource a process, it doesn't mean you outsource the risk. And when organizations seek for that assurance or reassurance from that third party, it's kind of generally the message of, don't worry, everything's okay. Well, actually, if you want some reassurance, that's where we can really help. So if I come onto our services, I feel like, or we feel like, we have a unique offering and positioning in the market. There are very few professional services firms that offer this sort of cyber assurance service as a service that can be embedded as one service, one team across organizations. The procedures that the team perform are swift. It's a great blend of human and technical expertise, leveraging technology where we need to. We're able to provide independent advice and recommendations. We're not tied to specific tools or contracts or anything. We can provide tool agnostic solutions. And you can see there the range of services that we perform. We can do maturity assessments. We can look at you against a range of frameworks. We can do that vulnerability scanning. So we can look inside your organization and see if there's any of those critical vulnerabilities that sit on your laptops, your desktops, your servers. If you've got an e-commerce platform, we can look at your web applications. We can scan them again for weaknesses. We can do some help you with supplier due diligence processes. We're even doing stuff as part of transactional due diligence as well, where we actually conduct procedures to either support sales processes or buying processes as part of that. And one of the things for me that's really important is that if you have an organization that's taken cybersecurity seriously, that genuinely signals an operational maturity, which can be great in so many walks of life, conversations with customers, with vendors, with potential buyers, so many positive impacts as a result. I hope you've enjoyed this session, and just thank you very much for listening.